Welcome to my talk about adopting AsyncAPI in enterprise contexts. So we're looking at how to adopt AsyncAPI as a new specification in town in regards of EDAs and all the things around, so events, messages. My name is Kocot. I'm working for Concentric in Germany. You find here some stats on mine. So I'm the head of API experience and operations. So I'm doing crazy things with APIs all the time. And you find things about me on Linktree. So if you're interested to follow me, just get there, or you find me on LinkedIn and leave me a message if you like. So when we talk about enterprises, there are a lot of challenges actually in obtaining things, getting done with things, starting new things, or getting part of initiatives like all the API things around and all the things in regards of APIs. So we have some kind of speed and quality thing. So normally enterprises are not that fast to really move on to get things with the highest quality available. So this is one of the challenges they have. So this time to market thing and all the things around. And we're having complex environments. So we're having a lot of complexity there, and it's not so easy to find things. So you do things on your own, you find things, use stuff, and you find out later that somebody else is also using the things and is on another level to that. So there is no real communication and things about. So we are really in complex environments. And as mentioned, there are a lot of tools actually available. So everybody brings in his own tool and plays around with it, brings up the solutions with the tool, but it's always regarded to the things I do on my own actually. So there is no real breaking up the silos or anything like that. So it's really covering the things, having a tool and using it, or lots of tools actually. With a lot of tools, there come a lot of ideas actually. So this is really one hard part of the story of the challenges regards to an enterprise. So we have a lot of ideas, a lot of people running around having ideas all the time. And it's really hard to get an idea of what should be the next step that will bring value to the whole concept you're creating actually. So in the end, we're missing focus. We're doing things around and moving around, and we are not heading towards the right direction. Actually, we are missing a path. And this is something you see a lot when you talk with enterprises about this API thing or this architecture type of thing. It's really missing the focus. It's just focusing on little things, but not on the whole big picture actually. So everybody is looking at something different, but they have not the real big picture available. And normally when you work in enterprises, you have this enterprise architect sitting there in his ivory tower doing things, or a team of enterprise architects sitting in their ivory tower and discussing things. So they have a specific view on things. They're looking at things might be different to what a developer is looking at, or also a stakeholder or a consumer on the other side is looking at. They're looking at things on their own, and sometimes at a lower speed that might be needed to be faster in the market to really have this speed and quality thing around, which we found out earlier. And when you talk with enterprise architects, they're lacking solutions. So they're really thinking in this whole concepts and patterns and all the things around, but they are really lacking solutions. And when you think about something like Async or OpenAPI, we have to bring up solutions because sometimes there is no solution available. There is no tool available because everybody loves to have tools around. But this is what we are lacking here. We are lacking really the concept thing. So bringing up a solution that bring value to the company, to the organization, so on. And when we look at something like APIs, it's really hard for enterprise architects to cover the whole space of APIs actually, because they are just focusing on maybe the needs somebody from the inside has, saying, okay, there might be someone want to have an API, but they're not really looking on the outside. So who might be, or who could be interesting on the consumer side? So they're really looking towards their stakeholders, actually. And sometimes it happens that somebody brings up a term like everything is an API to really shake up the people and saying, oh yeah, we have to do everything with APIs. But we will see that's not the real thing when we talk about APIs and AsyncAPI in general, actually. So this is something we see there, having enterprise architects covering the things, and they're really hard on finding the governance types. So they're looking towards, to stress people actually not to work with them. Sometimes they work against people. And again, they like tools. So they're looking for solutions with tools, maybe. And this is something we don't need in these times. We need to be flexible. We need to be sometimes evolutionary in regards of architectures and all the things around. So we have to really get onto the right point. And when it comes to APIs, and we want to adapt the idea of APIs, we have to do something called, we call it API enablement, with the idea of design thinking. So we call it API thinking. So we have to really empathize with the stakeholders to understand what are their needs, what might be a business case towards what to bring to consumers, actually, sorry for that, and to really see what is needed from the outside and maybe also from the inside. Then we go over to define data, because we are just transporting data towards with APIs. And we see here that there is a really need to define the data structure, to really make sure that everybody understands what type of data structure will be delivered. After that, we move over to defining the API, the contract, to make sure that somebody could already test the things, to make it available somewhere. And then comes the point where we look at the API endpoints and the backend implementation, and to really look how to cover the things from the backend to another level, maybe to the outside world, but it could be also inside. And at the end, there's this final testing by stakeholders who are involved at first place. So maybe first customers brought up by the providers of the API to really test the things. But testing will happen all the time, actually. Normally, when we go into this direction and doing API enablement, we are really hard on this RESTful thing at the beginning. So we start documenting things that are already there, because you will find APIs around at every company, and most of the time they are RESTful. But RESTful might not be the right answer to every challenge you have, to every requirement you might need. So we really have to think about, and we can do this by really classifying things, because we have to think about what type of APIs do we share actually? Do we share something more related to data? Do we share something more related to a use case? So we have to bring up a classification for API types. What we in projects normally do is we have so-called platform APIs, which are really data orientated, coming just with data from a backend or from different backend systems. And then we have service APIs that provide another level, more the experience level, to really bring the value to the consumers of the API. And when you look at this, you see that sometimes when somebody finds out there's anything more than REST, we find something like events and messages. And throughout the internet or using Google or something like that, what we hear a lot with enterprise customers talking about, if we have these events and messages, we have now to use AsyncAPI as the specification to really describe the things we have here in regards of events and messages. That's actually not a good idea, because AsyncAPI is not OpenAPI. So with OpenAPI, I really describe an API endpoint. I do this very explicitly, saying what is possible within the contract, what can be delivered, what is needed to trigger the transport. Actually, with AsyncAPI, I start also describing some kind of the backend I'm using. So which message broker is involved, how is it configured, what is needed to get the information from the message broker. So it's really something that I'm describing my architecture around that. So we really describe the backend, which is providing the message. And with this description, somebody else is able to consume the messages, because they know now that we are using MQTT, or we have a Kafka server there, a Kafka broker there. And somebody with this knowledge knows now how to handle the situation, how to move on, how to really cover the needs with having this asynchronous API description. But as mentioned, we are not just saying, oh, this is a contract, you can use this, you have this endpoints. We describe even more about that. So this is really something to think about, because not every developer or API designer, or whoever we call them, is maybe able to really cover the needs to write down AsyncAPI in that case. So what we need is that we really have to think about, is AsyncAPI only one part of the medal, or is it enough actually? So if you would like to describe the message purely, we still need something different, like just cloud events. So if you are really interested on the payload, purely on the payload, with no idea of what is happening around this, it's enough to use really cloud events and to bring this up, because it's easier to just share the payload and give this a structure on, and define things around what is available, what can be achieved actually by covering the payload actually. And for this, we really have to specify design principles and libraries to cover the needs, because nobody will be able to build up an async file on their own actually, if they are not really into the technology you're providing by this. So if there's just somebody consuming the things but wanted to have also a description because it's not really available on their side, it's easier to really use design principles with references and so on, because there is what AsyncAPI is good in, because we rely heavily on the OpenAPI principles. So we can use components, we can use these components and references and so on. So we really have to bring up design principles to make sure that everybody is in the position to write down or to create an AsyncAPI description so far. And this is really one of the things you have to cover when you roll out something like AsyncAPI and even OpenAPI inside an enterprise. You must have these design principles, these libraries. So you need a lot of guidance or guidelines to make sure that everybody understands how to build such things actually. And with this, if you have already a RESTful guideline or something like that, you should also have an AsyncAPI guideline to really make sure that everybody understands how this definitions should look like actually, and not to say, okay, I'm just writing the things down and somebody else will just read the representation and have a look at it. It's something totally different, because within the OpenAPI definition, if somebody wants to read the OpenAPI definition, it's really clear what to find there. So you find endpoints and you find a server description. So you know the base URL and all the things. But having AsyncAPI, you get more information. You know now what is the broker, what is the configuration of the broker, what should I bring up because of the bindings and all the stuff. So it's really something to really think about. And sometimes when somebody is providing the things, they might not even know, because they're just saying, okay, just create me a topic on our Kafka broker, but they don't have any ideas how this Kafka broker is really configured and what is the URL or something like that. So they're really just covering on saying, okay, just provide me this topic. And this is something where we should really bring this design principles and libraries up, saying, okay, we want to make it easier for the people to use such stuff, so that they even have the experience, as mentioned before, that they see some kind of non-differentiation between AsyncAPI and OpenAPI, but they understand that there are some things that they should bring up from another level, actually, to make sure that everybody brings in the same components, the same references, and so on. So you need some kind of guidance there. And then it's a mixture to really say, okay, if you want to have the payload, we could bring it as also and combine this with AsyncAPI having cloud events. But by this, again, you really need to define and specify these design principles to really move on into the right direction to cover all the needs, actually. And you can really do this by using the enablement process we found out earlier. So this enablement process works with every API interaction pattern that is available, actually, even the event-based ones, or even the resource ones or hypermedia ones. So whatever you would like to have, you need design principles and libraries to cover the needs of the users, to not leave them actually alone to write definitions on their own, actually, to really make sure that the definitions have a good quality at some point and at some level, actually. And one important thing on the other side is, so we talked about having the design principles specified and libraries to cover the needs. We need automation to lower this cognitive load we create, actually, by using something in this specification style of AsyncAPI or even OpenAPI, because not everybody is really aware of what is possible with these specifications. Nobody knows them in all details, actually. There are some people who know them in all details, but there are a lot who don't know, because in these times it's quite easy to generate things by generators and everything like that. So a lot of people just generate these definitions, but they don't question themselves, well, is this a good definition? Is this definition understandable by everyone? Because they are lacking things like all of the things in regards of polymorphism. So we really have the problem to find a good definition standard. And there, what we thought about is, on the early slide, is really to have design principles, saying, okay, we want to have some kind of principle. When we write a definition, it has to look in this way and has to use these tags or whatever. So it's really something, sometimes when you use a generator, it's not really possible to do so. So we have to find things to automate really the creation of an AsyncAPI description in that case. This is the most thing we have to work on. So really find things to automate the stuff to make it available to others, actually, because in the end, it's just a pipeline thing to really move things forward from one part to the other and saying, okay, this is the description that you can use. It is provided by this API provider in that case. They are responsible for the API definition, and this is what you can do with it. So we find the topic and all the things around, and you can just use it. Maybe you put it on a portal or something like that in the end, but that might be not the best idea to do so. Maybe you just need a table with where you just store the topic in, or the topics from this specific API description. So there are a lot of ways actually to really think about to move on to another level actually, and bringing people on the right track in this way. So it was just a short one because doing enterprisey things takes normally a long time, but it's a lot in smaller steps actually to really think of. And when we just wrap up the things, we learned that we have to adapt some kind of enablement, in that case, maybe API enablement to call it so. Then we need something to classify API types to make it easier for people to understand maybe what API interaction pattern they should use. So if it's more of a need to have an async API on that level to provide data from the backend and so on. So it's really something to think about in classification of API types. And one important thing is to really think more in architecture, to really make sure that you understand what is happening in your backend. So not just to bring in something like a message broker and saying, oh yeah, we have to use it. So to really think also about the consequences to have this message broker. Maybe it's a good thing to have a message broker in a second step to really make sure, okay, at the beginning, we think about synchronous stuff because it's easier for us to handle, because the backend systems we use are not really able to cover the things, because you can evolve your APIs over time. So it's nothing that is written in stone. Actually, when you say, oh, I have an API, you can change it if you have the need to change it. So really think about more in architecture all around, all the way. So really say, okay, I have to think more on the architectural level also, not just providing this and it will be good. So really think about the architectural consequences to do things in that way. And the last thing around this is really think about automation to lower its cognitive load, to make it easier to people to step in, to be part of this whole thing, and to bring up value to the organization and to the whole company actually. And this is what it's really needed when you really want to adopt something like AsyncAPI in a whole enterprise level. Really think from the beginning how you can automate the things to make it easier for the developers and the people involved, the DevOps engineers or whatever you call them, to really bring them on the right track, to really make sure they understand the benefits of having APIs around, even if they are RESTful, even if they are event-based, so that there is this understanding how valuable APIs can be for the whole organization in that case. For me, it's to say thank you that you listened to my short talk about adopting AsyncAPI in enterprise contexts. And if you have questions and answers, I'll be ready to give you answers to your questions. Thank you.